You're listening to Signals from the Core, a podcast about adventuring in the core sector of the Mongoose Traveller 2nd Edition role-playing game. This is where the bureaucracy is dangerous, the nobles are lethal, and where power, paranoia, and prestige collide. I'm Captain Aurelius, and I'll be your host. In each episode, we explore the tangled heart of the Third Imperium through original story hooks, people of interest, encounters, locations, and the tools you need to bring high-stakes, low-trust campaigns to life. If your crew is headed for the throne world, buckle up, because here in the core, secrets don't stay buried. Not for long. On today's episode, we're going to talk about beginnings, specifically the beginning of Singularity, the new campaign by Christopher Griffen we talked about extensively last week. You may remember back in episode 2, I think it was, where we talked about the kinds of characters that best fit in core sector play. And all of that still holds, so I don't want to retread too much ground here. I also don't want to suggest referees should pigeonhole their players into specific character types to suit the setting either. Player agency is important to maintain in Traveller. It's at least half the fun in the game, but you also want the players to be able to make informed decisions about what type of campaign they'll be playing so they can plan accordingly, right? To the degree that's possible with Traveller's randomly rolled life path. For some referees, it could be as simple as you're in the core, here's a little bit about what the core is like, and you're looking for work. Go. But every referee is different. So I asked in some of the Facebook Traveller groups and on the Traveller subreddit, how do you like to prep players for your games in your Traveller universe? Do you pick, do you offer a pick of game types to choose from, run character generation first, and pick an adventure to suit the crew that emerges? Do you set constraints and have players build towards something specific? And the answers were pretty interesting, so I wanted to share some of them here before we dive in. But first, if you like the show, remember to rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, especially. They really help boost the show's signal and get more people to see it. So anything you can do there would really help me out. I appreciate it. Richard on Facebook writes, he goes with campaign type first, then character generation, then adjust as we play through. He also gives players some points to tailor their skills. And he says, always have a mix of scenarios ready when we pause between or during scenarios or scenes. I'll offer my players 3 options as to what they want next. He does this in his other games as well. Thanks for responding, Richard. That was great. Mr. Wiggles on Reddit says, if I have a more structured story in mind, that would be better played out by a certain range of characters, I'll state that up front and guide character generation for that. Or I'll come up with a plot after character generation and let the gaggle of characters I get to inform what's happening and ask what they want to do. Either works. That's my experience as well, Mr. Wiggles. My Flesh on Reddit says, I generally have a larger story I want to tell. I then do character generation, and at the end, after everyone has their character and backstories and whatnot, in the section where they choose the type is when I let it choose. I think he means when he lets kind of the fleshing out more of the story. And then from there, I tweak the story. For example, will it be more adventure or action? More trade or science? And finally, I meet with everyone one-on-one and flesh out their backstory and items more. And in this part, I might give or add something to fit the world, and of course, change the world to fit them too. Fun tool, he suggests, let the players get one boon in character creation, and then in your one-on-one, reveal they got it because X person or organization helped them. And that can be a shared contact of some sort. It's an easy way to connect them to your larger story. And either they helped them and they succeeded, or they helped and still failed. With their boon, I think he means. Dr. Halsey, also on Reddit, says, I find Traveller to be a very forgiving system in allowing characters to do a wide variety of things. I do too. You don't need a level 3 in a skill and a 12 stat for that to be your role. Someone with pilot 1 and a +1 dex is perfectly capable of being a ship's pilot. With connections, you get up to 2 extra skills, and then the campaign's package skills, the party should be able to crew a ship or whatever they want, or whatever other task the campaign sets before them. It's important, though, and I think this is important, for players to separate their character's identity from the job. If a player thinks of their character as quote unquote the pilot, they will fixate on that pilot skill number. Instead, they should think of their character as the one who's always trying to get everyone else to lighten up and have a good time, even when things are going bad. He always thinks that things are going to work out. Sure, he sits in the pilot seat, but that's not who he is. And it isn't the most memorable thing about him by a long shot. The other thing is making sure the players understand the tone of the game you want to run. Be clear if you expect professional officers aboard a ship or a bunch of rowdy space truckers. That's another really good point. Michael, over on the Traveller RPG Facebook, says, I have a campaign or adventure in mind. Currently, he's running Pirates of Drinax. Then run the Mongoose Traveller 2E character generation and see what events and enemies are thrown up from the life events table rolls. Following that, I try to thread them into the campaign. As events occur in-game, I try to allow the players space to chase new plot lines and see what happens, weaving that into the main plot line as able. Good work on the pod, by the way. Keep them coming. Thank you, Michael. So, how do you prep for your campaigns? Let me know by sharing your ideas and thoughts. Send your signals to coresignalsmail@gmail.com or follow along on Blue Sky. I've got a new Blue Sky account just for the show, signalsfromthecore.bsky.social. You'll find those in the show notes too. I learned that lesson long ago. Now, without further ado, over the next couple of episodes, we're going to focus on different ways to prep for and kick off a campaign for 2 different kinds of groups. We'll specifically be talking about wanting to launch Singularity, but the methods we'll go through could work for any campaign. This episode is going to be for groups starting fresh with newly rolled up travelers. The next episode will be for groups continuing with established characters who've already been adventuring, either in the core or anywhere else for that matter. But it's different lenses, same campaign launch, right? Just different ways to approach it if you're starting from scratch with new characters, or you're continuing along and it's just another in a long line of continuing adventures. So let's get into it. The opening premise of Singularity, straight from Act 1, goes like this. The campaign begins on Capital, where the travelers have assembled for a meeting with an important patron. If these are newly generated travelers, the referee may determine that they have mustered out here on the Imperium's gleaming, opulent throne world. Freshly retired from their previous careers, they may be looking for a new vocation. If the selected travelers have already been adventuring in the core, then their arrival at Capital might be the result of a rumored job offer or a summons made to them based on their success in previous adventures. In either case, they've come in response to a call from an ally or contact. If none of them have a suitable one, simply select the traveler with the highest social standing and inform them that a noble friend of theirs has requested their presence. So that's the published setup. And here's kind of where I started thinking about how I would run it. And generally how I like to kick off campaigns and really putting some structure around it. It gets back to a lot of what some of the folks wrote on Facebook and Reddit that we went through at the top of the episode. I kind of approach things similarly. But as a referee, one of my favorite things to do is think of ways to kick off a new campaign, right? How do I get better? How do I set things up more? And sometimes it can be the most challenging part of the whole adventure, especially if you have demanding players who need that kind of deep immersion to set the right tone and vision for a campaign. You know, if they're like always seeking a motive for their character, like why would my character want to do this? Well, how is that going to be, something that my character would want to do? Now, you could just hand wave all this and say the travelers arrive on Capital for a meeting and go from there, kind of similarly to what the published setup says. But we also have other options to play with. Remember on the last episode where I emphasized how into finding emergent storytelling opportunities I am? Like, for me, campaign setup is no different. It's just expanding on some of the parts of Traveller that I love the most. Random rolls that help flesh out details, plant seeds, create dangly little threads the players can pull at later, or that the referee can weave back into the story down the line. My philosophy is that a referee, and a player for that matter, should seize every opportunity to generate stories and consequences from dice rolls. Published campaigns and adventures are amazing, for sure. But they can also be used as just the framework or setup within which you all collectively create the stories, plot elements, twists and turns, and story hooks that you want to pursue. Now, maybe that's just my deep love and appreciation for open world sandbox style video games like Elder Scrolls or Fallout, and that's just coming out. I mean, I've played hundreds of hours of Oblivion, for example, off and on over the last, 20 years since that came out, I think now. And up until the remaster was released about a year ago, I'd never even closed an Oblivion gate. So it's little wonder that I approach tabletop games somewhat the same way. Side quests are the main quests. A lot of times. Like what's coming out of occupying the world around you. Sometimes those avenues, exploring those avenues, are the most appealing. Because you're kind of pulling that story and molding that story together at the table. You're not going necessarily by the book. The book is always still there. You can get things back on track anytime. But what are those other opportunities that come out of character generation, allies, contacts, enemies, things that happen, encounters that you follow up on, and a new wrinkle emerges? That's exciting. So I'm always looking for ways to generate those story angles for later use. to be followed up on down the line, or create immersive elements that the players can use to develop their characters a bit more. And Singularity gives us great opportunity for that right from the start, right? Act 1 includes, or kind of suggests, a recruitment sequence where the travelers are approached by intermediaries to get them to capital. And that sort of kicks off the whole campaign. The book presents it as a fairly direct setup. Each traveler gets contacted, they all converge on capital, and the campaign proper begins. It works as written. It's fine. But the recruitment moment is also one of those places where, with a little bit of elaboration, you can set a lot of tone, plant a lot of seeds, and give every player at the table something to chew on before the campaign even starts. So when I think about that opening sequence as kind of teed up in Act 1, I look at it as another opportunity for roleplay, to feel things out and set things up. You could run it as a series of brief individual recruitment scenes, one per player, each lasting 5 to 10 minutes, followed by a group convergence scene with all roads eventually leading to that meeting at Imperial Park on Capitol. That's where all roads and signs point to kick this off. It's kind of something like this. Each traveler is approached separately. They all get a private vignette where someone reaches out to them about an opportunity. And the framing could vary based on the player they rolled, right? So if you have an ex-Navy officer, they could be contacted by an old commanding officer who knows of a position that needs someone with your discretion. Set it up that way. A disgraced noble receives a discreet message via the Traveler's Aid Society courier from a baron looking for staff with the right pedigree for a special assignment. If you have an agent, their old handler reactivates them. We want eyes on a particular vessel, and you're being placed. A retiring soldier sees a job posting that pays better than anything else he's found so far since mustering out. Or a drifter is sought out in a starport bar by a well-dressed woman who represents an interest that they alone could be right for, their unusual set of skills, right? A retired scout is approached by an old sector mapping colleague who needs someone who knows how to look at a star chart and notice what isn't there. So you get the point here. Disgraced merchant captain receives a private message from a broker who represents a client willing to overlook the bankruptcy filings for the right kind of voyage, right? A journalist who got too close to the wrong story is contacted by an editor she's never even worked with, but who has a piece that he needs a writer, and she fits the bill. You could even do a pardoned prisoner visited at our halfway house by a chaplain's friend who knows a patron who prefers staff with something to prove and wants to help them bounce back into society. So, the point here is that in every case, the recruiter, you could kind of make them suspiciously well informed, right? Like they know things about the traveler that they shouldn't. They name a specific past event. They quote skills the traveler hasn't listed publicly. The players should kind of feel a small prickle. How does that person know that? Like plant seeds for down the line for things that are going to happen later on in the campaign. The recruiters would all be different for each traveler. Sometimes a noble agent, sometimes a corporate HR rep, sometimes an old contact or an apparent stranger. But they're all actually working for the same person, whether they know it or not, and the travelers certainly won't know it at this point, but set it up to kind of get the idea across that there's a little bit of conspiracy going on here, right? You're just kind of teasing how this thing starts to play out. Why do they go to capital? Why do they want to take? Why are they getting this offer, right? Intrigue them as a means to kick the campaign off, right? In that way, you're kind of baiting the hook a little bit. You're not just kind of forcing them into it. Here's the campaign we're doing, off and running everybody in. Like, give them a little something to chew on first that leads them into wanting to learn more. But another fun way to approach it is to run it randomly and make it the capper to character creation right after mustering out. Have the players roll something similar to the rolls they've been making throughout character generation on the life event and career event tables. The dice did the work the whole way through, so let them do this work too, right? Again, the goal here is to get them to capital. Why would they want to go to capital? And weave it in as part of the story. So you're not just telling them you're in a park on capital and here's the premise, right? You get them from that transition from rolling up the character to you have an opportunity. And here's why your character would want to pursue the opportunity. So that's the option I want to walk through next. The basic premise is kind of simple, right? Traveller does a really good job of giving you randomized everything during character creation. Careers they pursue, the events that shape them, the mishaps that boot them out, from the benefits they roll at muster out, the connections they form with other travelers along the way. The dice are telling a story. One of my favorite parts of Traveller, certainly in character creation, arguably the best part about Traveller, is how random rolls define so much. They hand the player a character the player didn't even fully design. And the player gets to interpret what the dice granted and turn that into a person. That's the beauty of Traveller, even down to the world profiles, where you get to interpret so much. What the rules don't randomize is what happens after muster out. The character is built, the life path is closed, the player needs a reason to be whatever the campaign is starting. And most published campaigns kind of wave that part off, which is cool because that's for the referee to help decide, because every group is different, every referee is different, so it kind of gives you wiggle room. And that's what Singularity does. The book says, again, reminder, the book says the travelers are summoned to capital by an ally or contact, and if no character has a suitable one, pick the highest social standing and tell them a noble friend has called them. And that works. It gets players to the table. But randomizing things makes them more interesting. Every event rolled during character creation is a moment where the players learn something about their character they didn't even know yet. Every mishap roll is a story the player can tell about why they had to leave a career or the injury they got. The dice generate texture the player didn't have to write, and that texture can oftentimes be more useful than what the player would have written, because it's just generating ideas, right? It gets food for thought. You don't have to develop it from whole cloth. You kind of get a prompt and you run with it. So the question I started asking was, what if we took that recruitment hook and gave it the same treatment? What if at the end of muster out, the player rolled one more time and the dice told them why they were on a path that brought them to the campaign's first scene? The technique works on a D6 table, the 2D6 table with, the standard 11 entries. Same kind of setup as the life events table or the career events table. So you sort the table by what kind of by how character generation went, right? So you sort of divide it into two parts. Players whose travelers came out fortunate with strong benefits, good standing, careers that ended on a high note would roll on one table, and players whose travelers came out a little rough around the edges, washed out, broke, right? Just kind of thin, slim pickings because they just had a lot of hardship, they would roll on the other. The reasoning is that a referee would want different texture for those two kinds of characters, right? A wealthy, well-regarded traveler who came out of character creation unscathed as a dilettante or, high-ranking admin in the bureaucracy needs an explanation for why they would be looking for a different kind of work. A drifter or an ex-con needs an explanation for why they would suddenly be getting a call about a position they would never normally be considered for. So, same destination for each, but opposite social directions. Again, the goal of this campaign, right? You're going to be the crew of a luxury liner touring the core sector. So you kind of want to build in a reason for why you would want to be taking that job that maybe is never going to seamlessly work with the exact kind of career you just rolled. So each entry on either table needs to do 4 things. First job is to give the player specific reason. Specific enough that the player can picture it, can tell their character's version of the story without having to invent the central detail themselves. Reputation reversals, frozen inheritance, bureaucratic flags, debts called in, relatives naming them executors of complicated estates, or intelligence services making approaches that the character can't refuse. The player rolls, reads the result, and immediately knows something about their character they didn't know 30 seconds ago. It's like, here is your new circumstance. The second job is to give the referee a hook to come back to later. That frozen inheritance is also a thread the referee can pull at 6 sessions in, right? A bureaucratic dispute develops in some unexpected way, being flagged by a ministry that has the player's name on a list, and that ministry is, that's a story waiting to happen. Every entry should leave something live for the referee to use down the line or connect with later. The third job is to point at the campaign's starting scene without dictating what happens in that scene. The entry tells you why the traveler is looking for work and would be interested in going to Capital to learn more and hear more. The recruitment scene tells you what they find. The table sets up the why. The scene delivers the how. Keep those 2 jobs separate and the dice do their work without taking anything away from the player's agency. The fourth job is for it to feel just like the life path. Same flavor as a career event or a mishap or a life event. Specific and mechanical where appropriate, short enough to read and understand quickly. So that's the design logic. 4 jobs per entry. The table sets up the why, the scene delivers the how. If you want to write yours down, some tips, the categories of pressure that work for the fortunate side of the table, the travelers who've kind of come out with some level of prestige, let's say. I've been calling that sort of the down on your luck table. So, and it kind of sorts 5 ways, right? You get reputation pressure, where something the character did or something done to them has cost them their standing. Then you have institutional pressure, where the bureaucracy or guild or ministry has put a hold on their normal life, some wrinkle. And they get personal pressure, where something happened in their family or their love life or to them in a relationship that's making them reconsider things. Then you get coercive pressure, where someone with leverage is moving them around like a piece on the board, right? They're getting manipulated. And the deliberate twist, where the character isn't actually down on their luck, and the entire premise is sort of a cover for something else. So you can kind of roll that one randomly too, where it gives you a little something extra to play with there. But the point is, it gives you random reasons for why your well-to-do, super successful traveler is like, yeah, okay, I'll slum it aboard a luxury liner as a crew when ordinarily I would have been a passenger on this liner, right? You got to kind of help make that shift in fun and creative ways. For the rough side, the things are looking up table is what I'm calling it. The categories run a little differently. Networks repaying old kindnesses, institutions correcting old wrongs through amnesties or pardons or clerical accidents, patrons specifically wanting somebody with the character's particular history, recruiters operating somewhere between honest and not. And again, put in a deliberate twist where the offer reaching the character is not what it appears to be, and gives you a little something to play with there. The same approach works for any campaign starter, not just this one set on capital. Substitute the destination, substitute the core flavored mechanisms with whatever your campaign setting is going to be, whether it's bureaucracy on capital or border worlds in free traders in the Spinward Marches. A moot dispute becomes a clan feud in the Vargar, in Vargar space, or the Trojan Reach. Again, whether it's the bureaucracy of core or a bureau in the Solomani Rim, same shapes, different texture. You get it. The whole point is that you're handing the player a piece of their own backstory that the dice generated. And you're handing the referee, giving yourself a thread you can pull on later. If you're already running random tables for events, mishaps, and everything during character creation, adding one more roll at the end for a recruitment hook, it blends in as part of that session 0 and gives a campaign a launch that feels like it grew out of who the character is. I realize it's not the easiest thing to explain how a 2d6 table works without taking the time to go through every single one. But in the interest of time, I can't really do that. But what I will do is I'll do it. I've got my dice tray. I've got a couple of dice. They're actually the Traveller dice. They're the Deep Night Revelation dice, which are some of my favorite dice. But I'm going to roll 2d6 on the which one is this? The down on your luck table, right? I'm going to roll 2d6 and I'll read the result that I get. All right, so I got an 8. So I rolled an 8. Frozen. An investment, inheritance, or trust has been frozen pending a moot-level legal dispute that no one expects to resolve quickly. On paper, you're still comfortable. In practice, you can't touch any of it. Lose all cash benefits from your final career, but keep other benefits. The legal work is being handled on capital, and a well-placed ally has mentioned that a meeting there could lead to work suitable for your skills. Right here. I'll roll one more. 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, 9. Estranged. A cherished personal relationship ended with sufficient public drama that your social circle has quietly and without announcement stopped returning your calls. You're not ruined, only unwelcome. A change of scene is required. Somewhere your former partner's friends do not frequent. Gain a rival. A more loyal friend, still in good standing on Capital, has called you there to discuss an arrangement. So hopefully that gives you kind of some idea of what I'm working on here. If you want a starting framework rather than building your own from scratch, I'm working on something downloadable that pulls all of this together, right? You just heard a couple of examples of them. Drop me a line if you're interested in checking something like that out, and I'll let you know where you can find it when I'm finished. I realize I'm really slow when it comes to releasing this stuff, but I promise you I'm working on it, and I'm actually going to use it in my campaign when I run this, so it'll be done eventually. Just be a little patient and let me know. coresignalsmail@gmail.com or hit me up on Blue Sky and let me know. And I will keep you in mind. I'll add you to a list and you will get it when it is available. I also feel like we were being a little classist by only rolling on the down on your luck table for those fortunate travelers. So I'll roll a couple randomly too for the things are looking up table as well. Let's do that. Hopefully you find this fun. All right, that's a 3. I rolled a 2 and a 1. 3. Vouched for. A former associate from the worst period of your life who has since gone legitimate has connections with a patron on Capital. They've offered to vouch for you, and the vouching includes a deposit against your good behavior that you cannot afford to see them lose. Gain an associate as an ally with a significant financial stake in your conduct from the moment you agree to the meeting. I'll roll one more time. Equal time. Okay, that's 6. Oh, 7, 8. So 8. Placed. A union, mutual aid society, or veterans organization has put your name on a list. A patron on Capital has a standing arrangement with the organization to interview their members when placements come up. And the organization has decided you're the one they're advocating for in this cycle. You owe dues, loyalty, and a favor of their choosing at a time of their choosing, contingent on your making the meeting. So, anyway, hopefully you found that fun and interesting. The point of generating the hook this way, randomly at the table, with the players rolling for it, is the same point as everything else in Traveller, right? The dice tell you something about your character you didn't know yet, and that you can play with. You can elaborate on it, you can play around with it, you can fill in the blanks of what happened, color in the lines. The player gets handed a piece of backstory they didn't write, but they can riff off, and you, as a referee, gets handed that thread that you can weave in. So by the time the travelers arrive at Imperial Park for the meeting with this guy named Huldov, every player at the table has a different reason for being there. And the referee has half a dozen threads that are already in motion. And I guess, it should be underscored here that this also allows you to play with one of the elements of the plot in Singularity, that there's some manipulation kind of happening here. You get, spoiler alert for the campaign, but you get to a point down the line in the campaign where you kind of learn that your characters have been sort of manipulated or driven in this direction, right? That they're part of a bigger plan for a reason, and handling things this way kind of lets you play with that. And what I think and hope you agree, is a really kind of creative way that lets you, lets that happen organically, all together, right? Because your players are part of it. It's not just you as the referee trying to pull strings. It's like everybody's pulling the strings because you've got these random tables that you sort of design to fit in line with what's really going on here. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. I hope you had fun listening to it, and we'll move on to the next phase, because that meeting on Capitol is only the first part. So once you get them to Capitol, we get to the real heart of the matter. This is where it all starts to come together, right? You're getting to sort of the crux of what's going on here. The meeting on Capitol turns out to be with Minon Huldov, who's the assistant vice chancellor, and who tells the travelers that they all come highly recommended, and that he would like to put them in touch with a noble who requires a skilled ship's crew, and that it's a prestigious ship called the Ventura Fortuna. In addition to generous salaries, the captain engages in profit sharing, meaning, the better the ship does, the better the travelers do. And Huldov is offering to provide passage on a yacht bound for Onon, where they will meet with this patron, Baron Shreloki Hot Ellerfaust, if they're interested. So this is another inflection point, right? It's the why are you going, right? So you've done the how do you get to Capitol from whatever your circumstances were in character creation, why are you pursuing this lead, to why would your players now be curious to take up this opportunity, right? They've got the offer. And I get it. I mean, part of this and part of any role-playing game is the players have to play along. I mean, you're sitting down at the frickin' table to play a game. So, it's almost annoying if your players are like, well, I wouldn't want to do that. And then they don't take the crumb, that's difficult. I get it. But I still feel like it's on the referee to help with some of the rationale, to help flesh it out. So it doesn't just become this sort of like, well, we agree to it or we want to do it because that's the game. And so I buy into the game. So I'm just going to do it. I was like, yeah, that's completely fair. And it's simple and it works. But just for that immersion, it's just fun to play with, like, well, how do we make this realistic? How do we make it really kind of tie in with who my character is? So why would your players be curious to take up the opportunity? In this instance, let them tell you. After the meeting with Huldov about going to Onon to meet with the Baron, just ask them. So why are you going? And present them with a few options. If they don't kind of have any ideas, throw a few options out there that might spark their interest and provide seeds, right? So, and I've thought of a few as just kind of thought starters I'll share here with you. You could do it. It could be like the hideout. They need a hideout. They're hiding from someone. In this opportunity, the liner's transit kind of helps them with that. They can kind of just blend in, go away for a while, stay on the move. The long game, there's a specific person or thing that they're trying to reach. And this kind of gets them closer to that. The cover. They're working another job. They're a corporate spy or an INI agent, or a syndicate plant. And the liner is their sort of cover identity. They're almost being planted. And you can play with that kind of down the line. Like, oh, did the player know something kind of unbeknownst? And we get to play with that later. The debt, they owe somebody money or a favor for their, and this gig will help pay it off. And then there's just the intrigue, right? It's just interesting enough to be worth the visit. They didn't have enough. They didn't have anything going on. This is a great opportunity. I mean, that's simple and 100% worthy. And then the access, right? This could be appealing because of the proximity to power, possibilities, influence. I mean, it's a luxury liner in the core. Opportunity knocks here, right? That could be good in and of itself. And you get the view. They've never seen the worlds that the Ventura Fortuna is going to be going to. It's like a luxury liner in the core. It's again, it kind of goes along the line with the other one. The other one's about influence and hobnobbing with the kind of clientele who will be on the liner. The other part is maybe they've just got some wanderlust, man, and this is a way to get paid to tool around the core because they've grown up in the slums of capital and now they get to go all over the place. And they want to learn how the core's wealthy live, right? Because they've always been on the other side, and now they get to glimpse that upper echelon. So anyway, you get the point. There's a ton of options here. I'll throw in that material I'm working on. These will be included too. I'm kind of working on an entire, well, calling it sort of the Singularity launch kit, and these will also be included. I mean, think about it. The network they could grow. Crew of a core luxury liner. Just what network will they be able to build from that? And again, they could just sort of be on the run. They get the distance. They get out of whatever situation they've been in and can just go with the flow and get out of their status quo. Throw in a couple, for kind of seasoned folks too, those players who gambled it all and rolled characters into their 40s. It could be like the last hurrah. They're old enough to know this is one of their last big postings they'll be offered, and they want to take it before they can't. So anyway, I haven't turned these into a table yet. They're just kind of like ideas. And I actually don't want this one to be a table. I want this one to be tossed out to the players to kind of get them thinking about, why does this job sound exciting to you? Why does this opportunity, kind of given what you know now about those random rolls, if you decide to go with the random tables, because again, remember at the beginning of this, we talked about the way you could run the recruitment scenes as vignettes individually with each traveler. And that's an interesting way to do it, but you could also randomize it. I lean more toward the randomizing, but some tables, especially if you're just comfortable playing together and you've played together for a really long time, are way more into just role playing it. So just turn it into those one-on-one scenes. That could be really exciting too. So there's some agency kind of there where you can sort of play, but I want this one because I'm leaning toward doing the random reasons why you would find yourself in a circumstance leading you to capital, and getting that lead, following that lead. Then once you've met with hold of, I want it to be on the player to kind of think about why it's exciting to them. So that's kind of me probably belaboring the point of why the juxtaposition there, randomness gets you to capital, but now you've got another decision to make. Are you going to go meet the Baron? Are you interested in signing on to this liner? Why is that exciting for you? And giving the players some seeds that help them think that through a little bit, I think is really fun. So that's the new character version of how I'm thinking about launching this campaign. new travelers fresh out of muster out, dice still warm, recruitment scenes that kind of prickle with how much the recruiter knows, or random rolls at the end of the character creation process that give every player a different reason to be on Capital when that meeting happens. And then after the meeting and that offer, why are you going? Letting each player answer for themselves, letting the dice and the personal reasons do the work of giving the campaign extra texture. Next time, we're going to look at the same campaign launch from the other side. What if your players aren't fresh, right? What if they're a crew you've been running for a while with a ship, a routine, a shared history, a reputation in some quarters and scars in others? The same techniques can actually work for an established group, but the structure will change in ways that I think is worth thinking about, talking about. So in the next episode, we'll walk through what shifts when you're starting the campaign with those veterans instead of new characters. A lot of it will feel familiar, takes on, like I said, it's the same structure to the episodes. They'll feel really similar, but again, different tweaks, different options. Because there are just different things you got to consider when you're working with a crew than at the beginning of a campaign with fresh characters, which I think is kind of, it's a nuance that as I was planning for this episode and thinking through it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a different lens that we sort of have to look at there. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking too that, with the connections rule and the way sessions typically work, your travelers kind of come into the game already knowing each other, already kind of working together. And that's fine. I mean, that works sometimes. I've done it that way. But I really like the other approach too. And I've got friends who've run campaigns this way where you're all just sort of meeting. You come into being travelers at the same time and you meet up. It's kind of like you meet up, the old kind of cliche of you meet in a tavern, only here it's not you meet in a tavern. My trope in this is you meet on a transport, right? Or you meet in a starport, or you kind of like all roads kind of lead to this job. And sometimes, depending on how character creation has worked, maybe if you got 4 people at your table, 2 of you are buddies, or maybe it's 2 and 2 where you got buddies and they meet up. But I like the intro. I like the ease in to a new campaign or a new adventure with that intro. It's just always felt a little more natural to me that you can kind of get to know each other a little bit more and feel things out, because especially when it's new characters, you can kind of think through how your characters know each other, but until you've played in the character for a while, it's hard to really know what those relationships are going to be. So you can't really, and again, this is my opinion, right? Your mileage may vary, but it's hard to really get across how your characters know each other until they really start to get to know each other, if you know what I mean. So while it's fun to say, oh, I've known this person, since we were in college, or we met on a job, somewhere at some time in our careers, that's cool. And you can still do that. And especially if it was like years ago, you met each other, you kind of knew each other, you did a connections rule benefit, and then, or skill, sorry, and then went your separate ways for a while. So because there are people in our lives who we've known and been acquainted with, and maybe even were friends with, that we fell out of touch with, and then they come back into your life and you proceed from there. That's kind of how I like to do it, because I like the idea that by and large, the beginning of a campaign or adventure with new characters starts fresh with them mainly newly, freshly, or recently having come together. That this isn't, by the time you come to the table for a new set of adventures, already been working together for 6 years or a full term, even just a full term. Like, to me, that feels less fun than feeling it out as something new. So, that's why I think this approach works for new travelers, but that it's completely different if you're continuing into this campaign from previous adventures. Even if it hasn't been a full campaign that you've played before, like say you start with one of those core adventures that Chris Griffen also wrote, right? Like you go from Inari's Cantina to this. It's different because you're established, you're on a crew. So the question becomes, and we'll get into this next episode, well, why are they leaving that behind? Especially if they have a ship or they have an operating model that they've been using for their adventures. Why would you leave that behind and go, yeah, I'll go on this ship. I'll go on this luxury liner. Right? I mean, you can make it make sense, but it's a different approach than the one we've been talking about today. So hopefully you're looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to talking about it. If you've got thoughts on how you'd use any of this material at your table, I'd love to hear from you. Write me at coresignalsmail@gmail.com or follow along on Blue Sky at signalsfromthecore.bsky.social. Man, it rolls right off the tongue. You can find a lot of this info in the show notes. Well, you can obviously find the addresses that I just talked about in the show notes, but you can also find a link tree to make it easy to locate the show online anytime. And remember, if you enjoyed the show, please rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or any of your favorite podcast platform. But rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That's where it helps the most. And share the show with your fellow travelers. Until next time, keep your clearance valid, your comms encrypted, and your grav line out of committee oversight. Stay sharp, travelers.